Today, we've got the BRICS nations, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, all trying to opt out of using a US dollar-led reserve currency. And they recently announced earlier this year they want to create their own global reserve currency. So maybe this will be a great place to jump into the geopolitics of what's unfolding with the United States, trying to maintain, their grip on the global reserve currency, and maybe how that could be impacting or influencing their decisions when it comes to monetary policy, like interest rates.
Yeah, so Luke, an interesting thing about that question is both you and I think you wrote an article for Bitcoin Magazine talking about there's potential of the US actually going into Bitcoin as a primary reserve. And I came to the same conclusion. I can't remember which podcast that I talked about it on first, but some time ago, that it's a higher probability than people think that the US actually moves into Bitcoin, because the world needs a neutral reserve currency so that labor rates aren't artificially pushed down by governments kind of manipulating the currencies, and then because of that creating a way for trade tariffs to protect different industries in different countries. So this manipulation is hitting a time where if you argued the other side of this argument and said, has the US dollar system brought kind of abundance to the world, or not abundance to the world, but more people into a system and brought them out of poverty, you could probably argue, yes, the world is better off today for a large portion of the world. Now, it also devastates people in South America and Africa. But that trade, bringing China online, kind of that codependency, one is the exporter, one's the buyer, created a world that brought a lot of people out of poverty. But now where we are into the system, so with a strong dollar and with you say China is the exporter of the world, and the US is the buyer of the world, and when China is buying, most of the things China is buying are raw materials or commodities to be able to be the exporter of the world. So even when you look at the trade balance, that's where most of their purchases are going. That trade balance, the global sum trade balance, has to be zero all over the world. There has to be buyers and there has to be sellers. And for a long time, when China would essentially buy US bonds to keep rates low, it would be looking like, and that allowed US to have high labor rates, needed high debt, and to be able to do that. And China would, you could say, acted like vendor financing. We're going to give you give you vendor financing, keep rates low, and you'll buy our stuff. And that codependency that created a world where China grew and the US grew. As a result, both people seem to be winning. But now we're at a time where China, to keep going, that means U.S. cannot onshore critical industry with the high cost of labor, unless they did it with trade barriers. And because companies will find workarounds to move, just because a system is about money, we'll try to find workarounds to source where labor is the lowest rate, or where they can make products for cheaper. And so that system that actually once benefited the US now no longer benefits the US, because the same thing, now you have a geopolitical risk, an adversary who's grown very strong, that many of your critical components to your supply chains and critical industries are made there. And there's no way to move that without a neutral reserve currency. So I could imagine China wanting gold so they could play the same trick that happened before this and move to gold, and they could create a new currency regime around gold and then a Chinese yuan. I can't imagine the rest of the world going along with it. Um, and more so, I think that with Bitcoin emerging, it's the best way for the US to say to Africa and South America, this is a better form, and it becomes checkmate for China, because Bitcoin acts Bitcoin is a capitalist system, right? It's a free market system. It is not a command and control centralized socialist system like China. So it is really hard for China to advocate for Bitcoin and keep a state power over everybody, over everyone. So it feels like, well, not a certainty, that a higher probability, and probably a higher probability than people actually give credit. I think it's actually the only thing. I think it's the only thing that'll keep that extends the life of the Federal Reserve in the U.S. It doesn't keep it forever, but it extends the life of it, and and U.S. benefits more than other nations if they do it soon enough.
That's how I see it as well. You mentioned a big piece there. Obviously, gold's a massive one. So Russia right now is supposed to be an enemy of the United States. I believe the ruble, that fiat currency, is the most quote unquote backed. If you actually look at the amount of gold reserves Russia has, and if you look at the circulation of the Russian ruble, so Russia has a lot of gold. China has a lot of gold. If you look at their imports and exports over the past 15 to 20 years, you can come to some very interesting conclusions that maybe China is lying about their official gold holdings, and they're actually sitting on like 20,000 metric tons. So I like, the biggest pushback I get when I say the dollar could be backed by Bitcoin is they'll back it with gold first. And like you said, Jeff, like, China and Russia, like, they have a lot of gold. So I just don't see the US backing the dollar with gold and strengthening its competitors.
Yeah, either do I. And if you just the thing you just said, how much gold does China have? How much gold does any of these nations actually have? In a world with very little trust, how could you audit that? Right.
Exactly.
So how could you actually make that? How could you actually find out and build a system back on a hard currency like gold? And I don't want to throw. It's not a zero probability event. That's a step function on the way to Bitcoin. But I consider it a lower probability event just because of what would actually happen and need to happen to revalue to gold. Well, Bitcoin's moving faster and faster, and Bitcoin is benefiting from a network effect. And it now is on layer 2 is building on a network effect on top of the network effect that takes the power out of individual nations and puts the power in each of our hands. So as we trade more and more people are saying, I use the example of often, we're in this system and we're walking across a bridge. And as we're walking across the bridge to the other side of a new system, we're building that bridge stronger and stronger for every other human to walk across that bridge. That's what's happening with Bitcoin. And what's coming in that system, because it is the free market and because there's so much value to be built on top of it, is going to bring on first hundreds of millions and then billions of people to that system.
And that is all I've got time for you guys today in that short little snippet. If you did enjoy it, feel free to subscribe to the channel and even slap a like on the video, and make sure you check out the full 1-hour conversation that I recently had with Jeff Booth. We talked on a whole lot of other topics that we didn't discuss in today's short little video, so I would encourage you to head on over to the Coinbeast YouTube channel and check out that full 1-hour conversation I had with Jeff. It is jam-packed. Like, we talk about everything: nuclear war, currency wars, obviously how Bitcoin fits into our ever-changing world, and we obviously talk more about the risks of artificial intelligence and technology. Highly encourage you to check it out. Jeff is an established and very successful businessman in the technology space. So we also talk about some of the best tips and tricks that you guys can all use in your own personal lives to kind of develop online income streams and survive and thrive in an ever digitizing world. So if any of that sounds interesting, head on over to the Coinbase channel and check out that full interview with Jeff. And of course, once again, thanks to today's show sponsors, Hodlin Apparel, the BitBox02 Bitcoin only hardware wallet, and of course, Amber, the only place I'm using to buy my Bitcoin. Check out the links to all of the show sponsors in the description of today's video. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.